Here we go now, baby. Right back into the action for another day of the week. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Before You Bet. Airing live right now on the coverage, YouTube and X channels. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button and that subscribe button right down there. So a great big show planned for you guys today. Jon Middlekauff will be by in a matter of seconds to talk all the big storylines in the NFL and also give out his picks for the upcoming week. He's coming off a 2-1 performance on last week's show. Then in the second half of the show, Jon Metler will be by. We got a loaded slate here in the NBA. Guys, I am hitting at 100% with my NBA picks so far this season. Just 1-0, but still pretty good. Did you guys catch Bronny James? A beautiful rebound he grabbed last night. Don't hate on Bronny. What a story that is. Him linking up with his old man. Kind of cool to see Ken Griffey Jr. and Ken Griffey Sr. in attendance to take that in. If you guys want to participate in the show, very easy to do so. Hit up that live chat on YouTube, on X. What do you like in the NBA tonight? What do you like in the NFL this week? Who you picking in the World Series? That gets underway here on Friday. But now it is time to talk NFL. We got a big story to talk about too. So let's go down to our guy in Arizona, Jon Middlekauff. Jon, how we making out?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Doing good, man. So woke up this morning, got some big news. Hopkins looks like he is on the move to the Kansas City Chiefs. So 32 years old. Do you think he has enough left in the tank to make a big contribution here?
You know what's funny is it's like the draft when they go, we're about to have a run on running backs. We're about to have a run on wide receivers. It's kind of happened that way with the trades, right? We had a couple trades last week. We have another trade this week. And it's all wide receivers. And I think the cool part about the current NFL before we get into the specific trade is how much more aggressive these general managers, a lot of them are younger, get with making trades well before the trade deadline. We used to have maybe a couple players historically, and that has dramatically changed over the last couple of years, hasn't it? So it makes the NFL got a little Major League Baseball, NBA vibe, even hockey, where you get trades way more often now, which is cool. You know, Hopkins is interesting, right? Like, obviously, at one point in time in his career, he was a really, really dominant player, despite not being very fast. He was just one of the great 50-50. Honestly, he could be 70-30, where the corner had 70 and he had 30, and he would make the catch. He obviously had some huge years back when Deshaun could play. But even looking at his numbers last year, I mean, their quarterback play in Tennessee has been pretty poor. And he was pretty productive, 75 catches. So I put 0 to no stock into this year because of the Tennessee offense when it comes to quarterback. So I would imagine, they didn't have to give up much, only a 4th-round pick. You get a guy like their days. I mean, Worthy can stretch the field, but they're not a bombs away team anymore. They really have just been looking like, hey, on 2nd and 6, can we get a first down? And it's been hard for them, right? I mean, you watch Mahomes, not even just last week, all season, and people are being critical. He's bad, blah, blah, blah. It's like, guys, when he has to make plays, he makes plays. His offense, he's lost. I mean, he did it. I mean, not intentionally, obviously, but Rice with the knee injury. They relied so much on Pacheco in the running game, and he's out. Like, that's for an offense that wasn't super loaded. I mean, their best player is a 35-year-old jet setter in Travis. So adding him to go with Worthy, who definitely is, I mean, Mahomes missed him once last week when he was wide open down the middle of the field. That would have been a touchdown. They're trying to get him more involved. Now Juju got banged up, so you add DeAndre. I think it's probably a pretty easy move. They work a little bit money cap, right up against it. So they had to be very careful. I mean, not even careful. They were just limited on their options of what they could do. And this is just a solid, move. They still have picks. So if they did want to get aggressive, and they could always move money around, who knows? I mean, maybe they're still sniff around. But when you haven't lost a game, the urgency to do something, quote unquote, crazy is obviously not there, right? There was more pressure on the Bills, given not that they were worried about winning the division. Turns out that division's terrible, but their goal is to compete against the Chiefs and the Ravens in January. So they had to get a little extra aggressive with Amari and trade a little bit more. But, the Chiefs, they've won back-to-back Super Bowls. I was talking to someone, a buddy of mine on the Chiefs. Think about when they traded Tyreek Hill and they drafted Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis. who are, beside Chris Jones, their next two best defensive players. Those guys have been in the league 3 years. They've won back-to-back Super Bowls, and in their third year, they have not lost a game. Like, think about all the other guys in their draft class on all the, like, the Panthers and the Giants who just, like, what kind of world are you living in? And they're like, yeah, we play for the Chiefs. Life's pretty good.
So if they meet on a neutral field today, we discussed this on yesterday's show. I'm interested to get your opinion. So we know the Chiefs 6-0 to start the season, maybe not really blowing a lot of people away due to the play of Patrick Mahomes. Meanwhile, the Ravens look like an absolute buzzsaw. Those two teams are playing on a neutral field today. Who are you taking?
That's a great question. Listen, in the regular season, if you wanted to take the Ravens, no big deal. But how could you bet against the Chiefs, given the way that they've played that team when it mattered the most? I mean, it doesn't get any more difficult than last year. They had one of the great statistical defenses in recent memory. They're on the road, and the Chiefs went in there and took them out. And a huge reason is they had the MVP of the league, and they scored 10. What was the final score? 17-10. So until he does it, now this is why I put a lot of money on that game on the Ravens, because the Lamar you watch, I mean, obviously he's like a Hall of Fame player. I mean, he's one of the more dynamic, versatile players in the history of the NFL. But that guy in January hasn't played as well. Whether he gets a little tight, whether it just hasn't looked the same. It's not his offensive coordinator wasn't good last year. I do think, like, one of my big takeaways from the other night and really just the last 3 or 4 weeks is they've always had a running game, but it was a lot of kind of, J.K. Dobbins, good player, but, I'm not putting him in the Hall of Fame. Gus Edwards, like, they've always had solid running backs. Now they have a Hall of Fame guy who, if he gets a crease, is taking it 80 yards, 70 yards, 60 yards. He even just some of his non-touchdowns, they go for 40, 50, flip the field. And that's something different that they haven't had. Now, I would say the Chiefs, we just saw against the 49ers, they can neutralize the run game a little bit and put it more on Lamar. And again, this is where I struggle. It's like the Lamar you watch in the regular season, it's like this guy's picking people apart. And then you watch them last year, and he did the same thing last year. Now, Mark Andrews, it looks like he's coming on. He's healthy. So you add him with Likely, both healthy. Zay Flowers is obviously now a second-year guy, much more comfortable. Bateman's a really solid player. And defensively, they're really good against the run. If you think about it, like their knock this year, which is a fair criticism, their pass defense isn't very good. I mean, Baker came out of that early in the game, and it looked like, God, what's going on with the Ravens here? And then Evans gets hurt, and then it kind of spiraled right away. But they are not great against, covering guys. Mm-hmm. But that's not really the Chiefs' thing, right? So at the end of the day, the Chiefs are going to play in a lot of games under 25 points. Like, they want to win a lot of games 22-18, right? 20-17. And they're comfortable doing that. The problem is the margin for error on those games. I mean, you're one turnover in the second half away from it flipping. So I would say, in a weird way, the Ravens, again, obviously health permitting, we'll see, have a better chance. But here's the thing. Last year, the Ravens got that game at home because they screwed up. I mean, they lost the Chiefs, whatever, week 1. That Raider game, like, it would just be a one-game difference. The Chiefs are still going to lose some games throughout the season. Like, that could come back to haunt them if they have to go to Arrowhead. Because let's face it, is there anybody betting against the Chiefs at Arrowhead? That's hard. I get it on the road. You're like, okay, second time, Lamar can settle down a little bit. You got Henry now. But, like, to me, that's kind of the elephant in the room. Are the Chiefs going to have home field? I mean, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it looks like that's the direction things are headed in. So let me ask you about Russell Wilson. So I think a lot of people were surprised that he signs with Pittsburgh in the first place. A lot of people, including you, were surprised that he was getting the start last Sunday.
Were you?
Oh, I was surprised too, just based on the fact that Justin Fields was playing pretty clean football. He wasn't turning it over. They had a winning record. I think they were, 4-2 going into that game against the Jets. So a lot of people were perplexed by that mood. And people were even more perplexed in the first quarter of that game. Russell Wilson looked awful. He was skipping the ball off the ground. But ultimately, though, you pull back. He played a clean game. He didn't turn it over. He only took one sack. George Pickens bailed him out a couple times. That's fair to say. But He ends up leading the Steelers. That's the most points that team has scored in 4 years, John, against what's supposed to be a good defense. We're not going to talk about the Jets, though. So my question about Russell Wilson. This guy is a punching bag. He's easy to make fun of. He brings a lot of it upon himself. Do you think he has an opportunity to change the narrative and get back to respectability a little bit here this season with the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, if he leads them to the second half of the season essentially, and they maintain this 11-12 win pace, like that would be fantastic. I mean, the last couple of years they've got in by the skin of their teeth, and they're 9-10 wins, but it does not look pretty. Here's what I'll give Tomlin credit is I gave a lot of credence to like, hey, you're winning games, and Fields gives you a running element because the passing game was pretty hit or miss, right? It was the occasional he'd scramble around and throw it really deep to Pickens. And Tomlin went, well, the running game with my quarterback, I will give into that because Russell no longer is a runner, but a guy that is consistently comfortable just throwing go routes and deeper balls from the pocket. And it worked as the game went on. And he was essentially just throwing 50-50 lollipop balls up. And he let, a big-time talent in George Pickens just make plays. Now, I think there's two sides to this. Like, it was an impressive win. Now, they played the Jets, who were terrible, right? And they took advantage of it in the second half and kicked their butt at home. But, like, my takeaway is, okay, like, I feel pretty confident. Your coach, obviously, is really good, and the culture with the Steelers speaks for itself over, 50 years.
Yeah.
But is that quarterback play? And you could say the same thing with Fields, and this is probably why, like, who are we beating when it really matters? Because that's the question with the Steelers is like, I thought they were going to be bad this year, so I was wrong. But, like, ultimately, he's taken a lot of heat. He's like, when are we going to win a playoff game? They haven't won one right since 2016. Like, kind of in the peak of AB, Le'Veon, Big Ben was still a really good player there. And remember, they beat the Chiefs in the second round on the road, and then they played, I think, the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, and Le'Veon got hurt, like, on the first series, and it was bad. But, like, is Russell Wilson beating Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, or Patrick Mahomes? Because that's ultimately who you're probably going to play, right? Especially if you just assume, as the season plays out, the Ravens are going to win the division. So even if you're the 5th or 6th seed, you're going to go on the road to Buffalo or to Baltimore. So, I mean, you could have a really good season, go 11 and what would that be? 11-6 and lose by 10 points, right? So it's like, okay, it was like fun, but nothing actually changed from the last couple of years, which is the reason he is like Tomlin is in this weird spot. Like when I worked for the Eagles, Andy was kind of in that spot, right? Like no one argues that he's not a good coach, but it's like, where are we going? And now they're in this weird spot. It's like they have this, they put this Band-Aid over the situation. Both these guys are free agents at the end of the year. What would either one of them have to do to get a long-term contract? You know, I think, are they going to pay Russell Wilson after this year if he just kind of keeps playing like he just did, which is an upgrade over what they had, but still kind of in a weird spot? Like, what do they do? And then you win 11 games, so you're drafting like 22nd. So, like, and I'm not trying to be critical because in the moment, like, they're having a good season. I don't know about you. Did you think they were going to be like? I would not have predicted they would be 5-2.
No, I thought this was going to be the season where the wheels were going to fall off.
Same.
That is not the case. But that said, though, on the same hand, I'm thinking, on the other hand, I'm thinking, hey, maybe they have potential to be a bit of a sleeper here come the playoffs. And you start thinking about it, and you're like, well, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, the Chiefs are probably going to be at home. So probably not. You know, they're probably going to finish over 500, get into the playoffs here. But that might be it. But I don't know. Maybe a good story here potentially for Russell.
Well, because even if you're the 5 seed, right, and you have, let's say, the same record as the Texans or whatever, you still have to go on the road in that first game. Now, that would be a spot where they would obviously have a chance if the Texans also have like the similar record. That you know, if you just think about, given both teams were healthy, what are the Steelers like? A 1-point dog in that game? You know, it's not like they're not some huge underdog in that spot. Now, if I tell you they got to go to run the road in Buffalo, if they're the 6th seed and go Buffalo or Baltimore, I think we'd look at that a little differently, right?
Indeed. Okay, so not a lot of marquee games on the board here this week. Probably a good week if you want to go out apple picking or to a pumpkin patch or a farmer's market with your significant other, this might be the Sunday to do it. But Sunday Night Football, we got to talk about it. This game's obviously going to do a pretty good rating. It's not the same version of the teams as this time last year or even coming into the season, but Cowboys, 49ers getting after it. This is a big-time desperation spot for both of these teams. The Cowboys, it's been an embarrassing season so far, so they're trying to get back on track coming out of their bye. Meanwhile, the 49ers just can't get it going. You can blame the injuries. That's fair, I guess. They're not the same team, though. They're favored by 4.5 points in this matchup. So what do you make of this game here on Sunday night?
Well, I know this. Both teams are just in an awful, it's got to be just miserable in that building the last couple days. Obviously, for the Cowboys, they had a bye. So, last week, and then Jerry saying nonstop stuff. The 49ers are just in bad shape injury-wise, right? You lose Ayuk to a devastating injury. Debo gets, I don't know if pneumonia started kicking in Sunday morning. He tries to warm up. He has to take off his pads, and he's in the hospital by Monday. So it's now Kittle's got a foot issue. Purdy's probably had one of his worst, if not his worst game in a meaningful game in the pros. So this is not like you get that much credit for winning this game if you're either one of these teams, but if you lose it, it is going to feel, I would say, 5 times worse than it feels right now for either teams. I think it would be a worse loss for the Niners, right? This Cowboys defense is really, really bad. And to me, you still have, I'll take an educated guess and think that they can get enough fluids in Debo. And by the time Sunday rolls around, he can play. Same with Kittle. You still got Mason. Purdy should look a lot better against this defense than he did the last defense. I know they said that some of the guys that have been banged up, like Micah, are, have a chance to play. We'll see. I don't think, you go this long that you rush him back and worry if he's not close to 100%, right? But I don't know, man. It's been a weird, the Cowboys, let's face it, a lot of people were hammering their under. A lot of people thought that the Cowboys
I didn't get that, but
same. I thought they were going to be, 9-10 wins. But when you have that many injuries and your defense is that bad, any decent team you play, you have no margin for error on offense, so you can lose. And they haven't obviously just been losing. I mean, the home point differential speaks for itself. It's insane. It's like something the Carolina Panthers would have. But the 49ers, to me, still have, Bosa's playing at a high level. Fred's playing at a high level. They got good defensive backs. You just have to win this game. There's just not an excuse. And I think the elephant in the room, and this conversation's come up a lot this year, is well, if you're getting ready to pay him $55 million a year, you got to have some ability to carry you at times. And that's at huge added pressure that he didn't really have to play with last year, given that it's second year, no one was really talking about the money. And I just think this game could get weird. But the 49ers have owned the Cowboys, right? They beat them twice in the playoffs.
Destroyed them last season.
Yeah, so they beat them. They beat them in 2021 in Dallas as a big dog and kind of kicked their butt. Remember, the Cowboys kind of came back in the second half. Jimmy threw a pick six. And then 2 years later, Purdy plays them at home, beats them. When actually the Cowboys played pretty well. Defense was awesome. Dak played bad. I think he threw 2 picks. And then last year eviscerated him. Last year was a Sunday night game too. And just embarrassed them.
Wasn't close.
So, yeah, it looked a lot like their home games this year.
It was a turn off the game type of game that got so out of hand, I recall.
It really was. So I like the 49ers, but this has been ultimately where the 49ers screwed up this year. The Vikings, turns out they're a good team. You play them at home, you get beat, whatever. The Chiefs have owned you. It sucked the way they lost. They kind of just looked terrible. But if they lose those 2 games and take care of business against the Arizona Cardinals and specifically the Rams, what are you? You're 5-2, and you're not feeling that bad. All of a sudden, you beat the Cowboys, you're 6-2. But instead, you blew those 2 games, you're 3-4, and now it feels like, you have to win this game.
Yeah. Because
with all their injuries, are you just digging out of a hole? Now, it's weird. They have a lot of injuries, Christian aside, that Juwan Jennings could, it's not like it's a big deal. Hufanga has been banged up a couple times, but he's not out for the year. And obviously McCaffrey's kind of the big wild card. But at this point, anyone trying to guess on McCaffrey, it seems a little crazy given the mysterious nature. And I don't even know if it's mysterious. I just think it's clearly one of those injuries that no one quite knows how to handle, starting with McCaffrey, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was just a weird start. You could see some red flags in training camp for the 49ers with this contract stuff with these guys. And I don't know if it's quite going to be a lost season for them by any means, but I don't know if it doesn't look like they're ever going to be at full strength here this season. So we'll see what unfolds for them. Okay, John, let's get into your best bets here. 2-1 last week. Great calls on the Steelers and the Seahawks. You've had a lot of 2-1s this week. So let's keep that going here. Maybe get the elusive sweep here at 3-0. Let's start with what might be the battle of the two best rookie quarterbacks here. Caleb Williams and the Bears, favored by 2 in Washington, taking on the Commanders. Jaden Daniels, day-to-day, questionable for this game. If he plays, he certainly won't be at 100%. You're jumping on the Bears here.
Well, I think if you're the Commanders and you've had such a great start to the season that, sometimes guys get banged up and you're blowing him out and you kind of hold him out, but he stays in his pads. I mean, he left the game and came out in street clothes. To me, that's not just let's be cautious. That was like, no, you can't come back into this game. That's a relatively serious, and it wasn't like Debo sick, right? It was like a tangible injury to his side. So I am going on the assumption that he's not going to play. Also, if you are, let's say, like if it was a playoff game, you're like, he could play. This is middle of October. You're playing a really physical defense. You already have this little buffer, given that you've far exceeded expectations. Like, I kind of expect them not to play him. Like, I think this is a pretty risky spot. Like, can you afford to re-injure him, put him in compromised situations against a front, especially Montez Sweat? I mean, they hit pretty hard. And, like, I'm sorry if Mariota has to play, so I'm taking an educated guess here. Mariota plays. I know he made some pretty eye-opening throws that he hasn't made in a long, long time. I don't know if that's happening against this Bears defense, which especially their secondary's been really good. So, which is sad because this would have been two guys at full strength. I mean, this was one game we had circled, obviously the two heavy favorites to win Rookie of the Year. Caleb's coming on these last several weeks. So I'm basically taking the Bears, betting against Jaden playing. And even if he plays, I just, his running element, like, would he be the same? Would he be cautious? Could get burned in this spot if it just turns out, hey, actually he's completely fine. But this is kind of a bet against the injury and Jaden actually playing in this game.
Yeah, I think that Bears defense has been flying under the radar. They're very good, in my opinion. Okay, so a lot of people might look at this game and think that's too many points. You don't. I certainly don't. I'll throw some numbers at you after your breakdown, but you're taking the Broncos, or a 9-point favorite with the Panthers coming to town. I don't know if you need much of an explanation, but you can give us yours.
Well, just in a vacuum, and I think I heard Michael Lombardi say that in all his years around the league, this looks like worse than a lot of expansion teams. Oof. They had that one moment when Andy started who they beat, the Raiders. they killed
one game.
Yeah, one game. And then it's just kind of unraveled slowly but surely. Then yesterday, and he's clearly a massive upgrade over Bryce. He's not in a fender bender. He's seriously, you're in a kind of a serious car accident. The way they were tweeting about it, he goes right to the hospital. So listen, again, a little like Jaden, it's not like we know exactly what's going to happen, but you have to be a little unsure about his status for this week. Anyone who's been in any sort of car accident where someone's had to go to the hospital, it's a pretty jolting experience. You're not always feeling great for a little while. So I'm kind of going on the assumption Bryce Young might have to start on the road against a really good defense who also is coming off kind of that mini bye because they played Thursday, a team that has a good record, which means, Denver, when that team is good, has one of the better home field advantages in the league. If you tell me Bryce starts on the road against Denver, like, what's your over-under on points for that team? And listen, it's not like I love the Broncos, and Bo Nix, I think, has been underwhelming for what I had hoped, but does Carolina get to 12 points? Like, what's the over-under? Like 12.5? Is it 10.5? I mean, it can't be high. So all the Broncos have to do is, get to about 20 points. I'd be feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I have that on my card as well. And it often doesn't work like this in sports betting where it's just, hey, they're a bad team, fade them. Had you been fading the Carolina Panthers since the start of last season, you'd be making a pretty big profit here. So since the start of last season, they are 6-17 against the spread. This season, they are 1-6 against the spread. 14 double-digit losses since the start of last season. 4 losses by 20 or more so far this season. They're only 6 games in. 4 of their losses by 20 or more. They're getting their ass kicked.
And some of those games have been closer to like 35 than 20. I mean, last week was an eye-opening experience. Because, again, Washington has been a fun story.
Yeah.
And they're going to be a competitive team to make the playoffs for sure. But they aren't that good. It's one thing if you get rolled, if you're the Panthers, by, let's say, the Ravens or the Lions. To lose like that, I mean, I think you have to wonder, doesn't this feel a little bit like when the Browns were tanking? I mean, they literally were not trying to win. The Panthers are trying. They are trying, but their roster's terrible. They have a first-time head coach who just a couple years ago was like, could not become an offensive coordinator, was a lifetime position coach, who has a one-year wonder with Tampa that, let's face it, before these guys got injured, like Tampa's a pretty good place to be an offensive coordinator. You got a lot of weapons.
Yeah.
And I just think we might have overvalued a little bit. Like maybe Baker would have resurrected his career with basically anybody, right? He was just got his confidence back on a good team. I'm not trying to say Canales didn't have an impact there, but this Panther team, like they can't stop anyone on defense either. So Sean Payton, who's one of the better offensive coordinators of his generation, and to me, it's less about Sean Payton in the offense and more just if Bryce has to play, how are they moving the ball? How are they can't move the ball, or they have struggled, just last week with Andy Dalton against Washington's defense, which is not as good as Denver's. So I just go on the road, the altitude. You're right. I mean, conventional wisdom, anyone that gambles knows, well, this is probably one of those places I couldn't. I'd either stay away or hammer the Broncos.
Yeah, some people might argue letdown spot for the Broncos coming off that big win on Thursday night, but I don't think the Broncos are good enough of a team to find themselves in a situation where they're going to play down to the competition. They're a team that's kind of on the way up, just getting good, right? Okay, so another double-digit favorite. I should say another big favorite. There's a lot of big favorites this week. You like the Kansas City Chiefs out for vengeance against the Raiders. The Raiders beat them on Christmas Day, of course, last year, and you like the Chiefs to cover the big number.
Yeah, I think when you look the last 3 weeks for the Raiders, they're struggling. I mean, they're averaging about 15 points, and it looks even worse than that total. It's kind of crazy that they're even able to get there. I think when you factor in, the Chiefs played the Niners, and then they flew right to Vegas, so there's not a travel. And that element of, I think it's twofold. To me, it's less about whatever that guy that made fun of Mahomes, right, in training camp, and more about what happened on Christmas. I mean, they got thoroughly embarrassed. And I think the Raiders are actually much closer to like the Carolina Panthers or the Tennessee Titans than some of these teams that are going to end up winning 6 games and have competitive moments throughout the year. Now, I think the one hesitation would be as you go, well, the Chiefs, this is not a team that's scoring 30 points. Right. So when you are struggling to hit that 20 to low 20s mark to cover a big spread like this, you got to hold them probably to single digits, right, to feel comfortable about it. Well, you go, well, how good is this defense? Look at what they just did to Kyle Shanahan. And you would say Kyle Shanahan, even with random guys playing on offense, he still had George Kittle out there. They still had Jordan Mason out there. They still had Brock Purdy out there. Is what? 50x better than whatever the Raiders operation is on offense. And what happens? Aiden O'Connell hurts his hand. Minshew comes in, who's turning the ball over a lot. I mean, it would shock you. I mean, what's the over-under on interceptions this week for the Kansas City Chiefs? So the one thing this week, Mahomes the offense might score 17. I kind of like a defensive touchdown here for the Chiefs, or definitely a defense like all of a sudden you create a fumble and you get an easy touchdown because you turn the ball over like in their own red zone. So, I think the Raiders are terrible. I think this is a team that is in complete free fall. And this is why I didn't like him coming in, because, and this is before Devontae was going to get traded or whatever. It's like, okay, they got some good individual players, but their quarterback position is horrendous. And they have a new coach who not that long ago was a high school head coach. And I know he was a really good player. Same thing with Gerard Mayo. But the difference of being a head coach in the NFL and being a player, like there really aren't any similarities. Like it's just Bill Belichick in the peak of his athletic prime and like at 25 years old couldn't have dreamed of taking a snap at Alabama, let alone the NFL. It doesn't matter. So you give me Andy Reid against this situation, the quote unquote revenge game. I think this is just like this. The final score could be 25-6, something like that. And just did the Raiders even get the ball past the 50-yard line more than twice?
What do you think of this prediction? Raiders head coach and quarterback going into next season. Head coach Bill Belichick, quarterback Shedeur Sanders. What would you think of that makeup for Las Vegas?
I just wonder, and clearly Tom and Bill's relationship is a lot better than anyone thought. I mean, they're doing podcasts. They talk about each other nonstop. And Bill's just – don't you appreciate Bill just blasting people? Like he's really kind of coming out of his shell and
pushing back against Mayo and call the guy soft. Yeah.
Talking about the Giants. Like he's doing what it's very rare in this business, that if you put a microphone in front of a guy, even if you remove Bill's never really said anything, in front of a guy that clearly wants to come back to the NFL, like he does not care at all. And this is kind of who he is. So I appreciate him being so outspoken. I have a hard time seeing Bill, even if Tom kind of wanted him, go to the Raiders, even if they had Shedeur Sanders, because I still think like ultimately him coming back, he's not coming back for a decade. He's coming back to try to win now.
Yeah.
And I think he would be very specific. Like he's really talked up Howie and the Eagles. And that's a team that is much, they got some young defensive pieces. They got some now young corners. They got a quarterback who you can argue where he stands on the hierarchy, but he's still way better than all these other guys that we talk about. This is a team that I know the Sirianni and everyone was acting like they won the Super Bowl. It's like the Giants are awful. They were missing their offensive line. The Eagles have got no pressure all year long. And every time you looked up, there was like 3 guys in the backfield. So like, I still think the Eagles just on talent alone are going to win 11 games and probably end up winning that division. But like, I don't feel great about him in a playoff spot. But to me, that's the team I think he's most inclined to go to. Dion said before, though, like, we're not just going anywhere. So I do think Vegas he would be interested in, but he'd have to – I mean, Dion's his coach.
Shedeur's not going to be a Cleveland Brown next season.
No chance. And the problem is I think a lot of the teams Dion would want him to go to are good. Mm-hmm. So it's gonna be a fascinating thing, but I think he's really separated himself as the number 1 pick for sure.
Okay, John, let's end with this. You're a well-rounded sports fan. We don't need a big breakdown and analysis from you, but who's your pick for the World Series and who's winning the NBA championship this year?
I've been texting around because I want to put a little action on the Yankees. I wish, if the Dodgers pitching was a little better, I think that number would be a little more tasty. Mm-hmm. I looked last night and it was plus 105.
Yeah.
It's like if it was like plus 130, I'd get a little more aggressive, but I'm rooting for the Yankees. I want the Yankees to win. I mean, I'm born and raised a San Francisco Giants fan, so I can easily root against the Dodgers. But like Ohtani's cool, right? Mookie Betts, Ohtani and Mookie Betts aren't even their guys, right? They traded for Mookie Betts from the Dodgers or the Red Sox, and they got Ohtani because they paid him $750 million, even though 90% of it's going to get paid to him in like 15 years. Yeah. So I hope the Yankees win. Like, is there anything more fun than just watching? There probably has never been in the history of baseball 3 guys with just more true power on a team than Soto, Judge, and Stanton. I mean, Stanton's hitting these bombs like it's home run derby.
Yeah, Stanton's a guy who's been a laughingstock the past couple of years. He barely jogs down the first base when he's running out of grounder, but you can't knock what he's doing here in the playoffs. Wow. He's awesome with these home runs. And yeah, I agree with you there. Yankees plus 105. It's very close to me. It's kind of like whatever side is the underdog, that's the side I'm going to take. The Dodgers hitting's been a little bit better in the playoffs, but the Yankees pitching has been a lot better. So I think that's
you trust the Yankees bullpen is a little shaky in that Cleveland series.
It's so hard to say, right? Because it can be one guy comes in and it all goes to shit, right? So
100. And the other thing in playoff baseball, watching the Giants win the World Series that did not have the talent like of these two teams, and they won 3 in basically 5.5 years, is you do need some of the other guys on the other team to just go cold, and you need some of your bullpen guys just to get huge double play. Baseball playoffs are by far the most random.
yeah.
So it's, to me, with a matchup this close, if you're going to get, you just take the dog if you're not a Dodger fan.
Yeah.
I think for the NBA, isn't it crazy that the most NBA story ever is Joel Embiid is load managing game 1?
He's not going to be there for game 2 either. We talked about this yesterday.
And it's like, is he injured? No, he's ramping up. Well, it wasn't the ramp up like training camp. Like, isn't that like part of practice? You watched the Celtics last night and
wagon.
Yeah, just obviously they were scolding hot from 3, but isn't that kind of the way they play? I mean, I just think you'd be crazy not to pick them. I do think a sleeper, no one's really talking about and he's one of the better players of his generation, is everyone's out on the Bucks. And I think sometimes, everyone is propping up, this is the year with the Sixers. Well, Paul George's already injured. And Joel Embiid already said he's not going to play back-to-backs. And like, what's the over-under on his games? 55 max? Like, it's not like he's going to play that often. Everyone loves the Knicks. Well, we'll see. Their bench is not going to be as good. And Cat, you just do that flip-flop. Like, Cat's not really he's incredibly skilled, but he's not exactly Mr. Toughness. Yeah. So that could be a weird dynamic. I just think the Bucks, everyone's counting them out. Now, we'll see. Maybe they're just so old, and Middleton he's the only guy in like sports history to get surgery on both ankles, and especially as a basketball player, not ideal.
Yeah.
But I could just see Giannis having like somewhat of like an MJ Kobe just out for blood season. And Dame, he's so rich at this point. He's so famous, but it's like, this is his chance to win. And Doc's talked about, this offseason, how much he's grinded. So I've always been, a lot of people hate Doc. I've always been a fan. So I'm rooting for the Bucks. And to me, on the other side, like, I actually don't think the West is going to be as good.
John knows his hoops. A little overtime here. We'll have to throw some hockey at you here next week here, John.
That might be a little strong.
Right on. All right, man. We appreciate you joining us. As always, best of luck with those picks here this weekend, and we'll chat with you again next Wednesday.
See you guys.
Damn, he knew more about NBA and MLB than I thought he would. Checking in on the live chat here. Shout out to all the guys in the live chat. Around 1,100 people watching live right now across YouTube and X. Yoshi Dude says, great picks on the under for Towns yesterday. Yes. Finished with 12. I think the point total is 21.5. So like I said, hitting at 100%. On my NBA picks over the season. 10P Kid says Bengals are the only team that seem to hang with the Chiefs. That's true. There's something about the Ravens. It's a movie we've seen before from them. And I know the offense is different, but they have these awesome regular seasons. They're a buzzsaw. They go on these tears. Then they get to the playoffs and they're a little flat. So we'll see if that's the case for them. Yeah, okay, let's get into the NBA and bring in our guy who's super excited, representing his Orlando Magic. He's not going to be happy with one of my picks here on the show today. The Magic ass, man, John, 3 picks each from us today. We saw 2 games last night. The Celtics kicked the living shit right out of the Knicks. So bad debut here for the Knicks. The Celtics, I think they're going to be playing with a chip on their shoulder once again. And then the Lakers, I don't know if you'd say a shocking win last night. It was a pretty tight spread. Most people would consider the Timberwolves a better team. Of course, the big story in that one, the Bronny James comes in. He plays 4 minutes, I think, with his old man. And I don't know, John, we've talked about this before. It gets a lot of hate, and I see a lot of the hate towards the Bronny James thing, and I think settle down here. At the end of the day, who really cares? He's essentially the 12th man on the team. He's taking up a roster spot for someone you've never even heard of before. And we've had situations like this in the NBA before. Giannis's brothers, we probably have things where superstars have their buddies end up getting the 12th seat on the bench type of thing. But I don't know. It's kind of cool, I guess. Well, where will Bronny be 3-4 years from now? I don't know. That's a pretty big mystery. But any big takeaways from you from what we saw in the NBA last night?
Well, first of all, when I was talking about the Phoenix Suns win the NBA Finals and I was saying Budenholzer is going to make them shoot more 3-pointers, I think the Celtics really showed you why you need to shoot more 3-pointers. You're not going to beat the Celtics if you're losing that 3-point battle. I don't really know where it finished, but I know at one point the Celtics had like 9 more made threes than the Knicks even had as attempts. So like you're just not, the math just isn't there. I mean, if the Washington Wizards hit 29 3-pointers, they're going to win an NBA game. Nobody's stopping any basketball team that hits 29 3-pointers. That was insane. I do kind of think we might have collectively as a group cyber bullied the Celtics into being a better team, because Jason Tatum went and fixed his jump shot after the Olympics and it was looking pretty smooth. So we might all be guilty on that front. I see in the chat there, he said, I got screwed on the D'Lo assists. I would place that bet again. Played 34 minutes. He only had 5, didn't get over. There was the one play at the end of the game. LeBron outlet it, like 40 seconds left. He goes to dump. It goes to Russell. He goes to dump it off to Hachimura. You're thinking like just easy dunk. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I love the guy, great defender, but 40 seconds left in the NBA game, the guy hustled. You don't really see that in the NBA. And he knocked it away from Hachimura, and we didn't get the easy dunk. That would have pushed us over. But yeah, I'd place that again. I'll probably be on Russell again very soon, because kind of what I was chasing was there. We just didn't get the win.
Oh, those ones sting, where you're like, yes, I would 100% make that bet every single time, even though it lost. Those ones sting. Sometimes you would rather have the ones that aren't very close at all, and you're just like, well, maybe this is something I can learn from. You know, that was a really bad call for me in this situation. Again, I will never make that bet. But
I feel like there's so many assist props where they don't win, and you're like, I would 1,000% place that again. That's exactly what I was chasing. And there's also a lot of assist prop that win, and you're like, whoo, got lucky. Because that was not what I was, be like 3 potential assists, 3 assists. You're like, that was not good, but we won. So we'll keep pushing here.
Indeed. Okay. So yeah, NBA betting start of the season, just like any league, it's a little tricky, right? It can feel like flipping coins a little bit. There's some guesswork involved. You don't often have a ton of stats to go off of, but I found 3 spots I like. You found 3 spots you like. Guys, if you're watching right now live, hit up the live chat. What are you betting on in the NBA? Any interesting angles for people to consider? Let us know. Okay, so I have 2 spreads and a player prop. You, of course, have 3 player props. I'm going to get us started here. We have the Milwaukee Bucks taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. No Joel Embiid, no Paul George on opening night for them. I'm going to take the Bucks here. It looks obvious. I don't care if it looks obvious. I'm going to take them to cover this number 3.5. I think this game has all the makings of an FU game for the Bucks for so many different reasons. For one, Doc Rivers back in Philadelphia here. He's not going to take this opponent lightly playing in that building. And most importantly, though, the way the season ended for the Bucks last year, Giannis and Dame both banged up. They end up getting bounced in the first round. So you got to assume they're going to be coming into this game, coming into the season with a lot of fury, a lot of passion, a lot of effort. You take a look at how these teams have played each other the past couple seasons. Milwaukee's absolutely owned them. 12-3 straight up in the last 15 meetings between these teams. And of course, the big story behind this game, or for this game, is Joel Embiid is not playing, and he missed quite a bit of time last year with the 76ers. They were not good when they did not have Joel Embiid. They often looked like one of the worst teams in basketball. Overall, they went 16-27 without Embiid last season. A lot of double-digit losses. So I think there's a good chance that the Bucks smack them. In this one, I'll take them to cover 3.5. John, your first prop of the night. What are we looking at?
Yeah, before I get rolling here, chat, help me out. I meant to look this up. If you could, what's the highest total we can find on Andre Drummond rebounds? Because you just brought it up there with, Joel Embiid out, Milwaukee Bucks, all the things. I meant to look that up. Drummond, there's no backup center. He is the backup center.
All he does.
Yeah, and all he does is rebound. If there's like a 20+ rebounds, I'd actually probably consider. So if someone can find that, that'd be cool. But the first prop, I'm sure, as you all anticipated, Taurean Prince over 1.5 assists.
Of course.
When I woke up this morning, this is exactly what I wanted to bet on. It's just an opportunity thing for him. Chris Middleton's out for the Milwaukee Bucks. He's going to slide into the starting lineup. And when you're playing in a starting lineup, like 1.5 assists is, you don't even have to be an assist guy. Like you could put me or Joe on the floor. And if we're playing with Giannis, we just give him the ball. He goes and dunks it. You can get an assist, right? 1.5 is not a really big total. It's just like a minutes thing. He's going to be on the floor. The one thing you do like with the Milwaukee Bucks is, Brook Lopez is always a catch and shoot guy, and Drummond's not really someone who's going to chase him on the perimeter. That's for sure. But you also had Gary Trent Jr. in this year, who also is a catch and shoot guy. So, when you're talking about an assist prop, if I pass you and you just immediately shoot it, we like that. We get assists off of that. If you're a guy who puts on the deck and dribbles like 3-4 times, you take away the assist. So I think it's just the opportunity with the players he's playing with and being in the lineup. just kind of all flows. It's not a guy I would who's the highest this guy, but we're gonna roll with it at plus 170 for sure.
Okay, next up, it is the Battle of Florida, the Miami Heat playing host to John's Orlando Magic, and we will be fading John's Orlando Magic tonight. Give me the Heat here, -2. So like I talked about coming into the NBA segment, doing some guesswork, not a whole lot of stats to go off of. And this one just kind of rolling with a bunch of trends, but I do think some good ones here. So Miami has absolutely owned Orlando when they come to town. They like to bully their little Florida brother. They've won 9 straight home games against them. The Heat typically start strong at home, 8-1 run in season openers at home here for Miami. So I think Eric Spoelstra really emphasizes for these guys getting off to a strong start, and maybe even more so coming into this season. Last season did not end well for them. Pat Riley absolutely ripped these guys in a press conference to end the season. And, he really went after Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, he really took that on the chin. So we talk about guys entering the season with a chip on their shoulder. Jimmy Butler is going to be one of those guys. So I hope that's going to be on display here tonight. And Orlando on the road last season, they were not good. Their play fell off significantly outside of Orlando last season. 5 games below 500. They allowed 7.5 more points per game. They were 20th in point differential on the road. So give me the Heat to cover -2. John, what do we have for another prop here?
First off, go Magic. But so we're going Santi Aldama over 8. Oh, sorry. I bet this over 8.5 points, and it's now 9.5. That's not a reason for you not to bet it. When I was looking at it, the 8.5 -125 and the 9.5 even money, it was super, super close on expected value. So if there was 8.5 -140, I would have just played this myself. So if it lands on 9, that sucks, but that's just how betting works. It's probabilities, and these probabilities were really close. He's going to be in the lineup for the Grizzlies. Jaren Jackson Jr. is out. The Utah Jazz are massive. Taylor Hendricks at the 3, Lauri Markkanen at the 4, Walker Kessler at the 5. That's a lot of rim protection. That's a lot of big guys. Santi Aldama is going to play. He's a 7-footer himself, and he can shoot. So he can play beside Zach Edey, which is good. But Edey himself, Edey's not going to play 35 minutes. That's not Edey's game. So there's a lot of opportunity here for minutes with Aldama. And I just think the way the Grizzlies they're going to get stuck penetrating. They're going to have to kick out because of all the rim protection. And Aldama could be that 3-point shooter that benefits from that. So at 8.5, 9.5, I really like this. The projection was a little over 11. So there's a lot of room there for this bet. Great bet. I love this one.
Okay. Last pick for me, my favorite player prop of the night. Going with a bit of a boring one, but sometimes boring ones hit. We're going to fade Brandon Miller here. His point total 18.5. Going to take the under on this one. So he was a little bit of a different player when LaMelo Ball was in the lineup last season. As we recall, Ball missed a lot of games there last season, but when Ball is in the game, he tends to dominate the ball here. And Brandon Miller only averaged 14.6 points per game with LaMelo in the lineup last season. He played the Rockets twice last season, and he was awful in those games. Scored 5 points in one of them, 10 in the other. And the Rockets were a pretty good defensive team here last season, and I think we can only expect them to get better. Young team, good head coach, a lot of talent there. Last season, they were 10th in defensive rating. Maybe flew under the radar. I don't think a lot of people thought Houston Rockets good defensive team, but they were, and they might be even better this season. Hopefully that will be on display here tonight, and they can shut down Miller. Okay, John, bring it home. Final NBA pick of the show today.
Yeah, the Ime Udoka effect. He has the Rockets playing good defense. I see their Drummond 16 plus 130. Go higher. I don't know what the high. I don't really bet rebounding props. I don't know how high they go, but if there's a 20 plus, that's what I'm looking for. Because he's that guy. He was joking. I'm going off the rails here. He was joking on a podcast that when he was with the Pistons, he would intentionally miss to grab more rebounds. Then he had to clarify after because Pistons fans were like killing him. He had to clarify after that he was actually joking. But my last
thing to say, you got to rub that in the wounds of the Pistons fans. Come on, man.
Yeah. He was like, I'm just trying to win rebounding titles. I'm the best rebounder ever. Anyways, last bet, Derek Jones Jr. over 9.5 points, even money. I actually grabbed this myself at -105, so you can do 5 cents better than I did. For Derek Jones Jr., the Clippers, there's no Paul George, there's no Kawhi Leonard. He's out indefinitely. Someone has to score. There is not much offense on this roster. James Harden's usage is obviously going to be very high, but from like a points perspective, James Harden's a little past that point where he can just carry a team and score 35 points a game. He's a great facilitator, though. So I think Derrick Jones Jr. will be the beneficiary of playing alongside James Harden. And Derrick Jones Jr. is someone who can work off of a point guard like that. He can finish dunks. He can cut. He can catch and shoot 3-pointers. The one thing I do really like about this as well for Derrick Jones Jr. is they're playing the Suns. Obviously, the Suns have incredible offensive talent on the wings and the perimeter, and he's a really, really good perimeter defender. That's why they signed him in free agency. So that should really help his minutes. So I just think there's a chance for elevated minutes because of the opponent. And then you put this guy on the floor alongside James Harden and someone needs to shoot. I'm going over 9.5 for Derrick Jones Jr.
There we go. Let's go. Checking in the chat. Brandon Katz disagrees with me. He says that's a bad take. Miller was a better player in the second half last year. He got better. The Hornets have no one to take shots other than Ball, Bridges, and Miller. Yeah, I'm not knocking Miller at all. I think he's got a really bright future in the NBA here. I just don't like the spot for him tonight. He probably will have a pretty good season, though. Yeah, and Brandon Katz also says the best value in the prop market is Hield, over 11.5 points, plus 137. Okay, Portland's best perimeter defender. Thibault is out, and the Blazers are trash. I think that is fair to say. Hield is good in this system, too. Yeah, that might be one to consider if you're looking for some more props to bet. Okay, let's recap these picks here. John, you can recap yours quickly, then I'll go through mine, and we'll say goodbye to all the good people out there.
So Taurean Prince over 1.5 assists. He's on the Milwaukee Bucks now, plus 170. Santi Aldama over 9.5 points, even money. And Derrick Jones Jr. on the Los Angeles Clippers now, over 9.5 points, even money.
Let's go. And I'm going to go Bucks minus 3.5. I think they have a pretty good opportunity to potentially destroy the Sixers here tonight. The Miami Heat minus 2 and Brandon Miller, we're going to go under 18.5 points for him. That does it for this show today, but we got a lot going on here this week at Covers. Of course, the NBA season underway, college football, NFL. The World Series starts Friday. We got a big UFC event going down on Saturday afternoon, and we're covering it all here on the Covers YouTube channel. So make sure you are subscribed. Makes our content a lot easier to find. We're going to be right back with you guys tomorrow on this show. Of course, Jake Butt will be by his weekly appearance, talking all the big storylines, all the big games in college football. We got a Thursday night football game, and we got more NBA games. Jon Metler is going to be back with us to break down some bets there as well.
Quickly, where's that Drummond bet at? Where's that Drummond bet at? Jingles?
Drummond.
20 plus 500. I'm assuming probably 365 and a milestone.
Yeah, I don't know where you can get that at, but yeah, something to look into here for sure. Okay, yeah, we will leave it at that for today. Thank you guys for tuning in, everyone in the live chat. John for joining. Producer Mick, who's still under the weather. So shout out to Mick for not calling in sick. Did a great job producing today. Thank you to BetMGM for sponsoring the show. And best of luck with your bets tonight, everybody. We'll catch you again tomorrow. Woo!